Alrighty, welcome to Virtual Teaching Kitchen. I'm Julie. I'm a registered dietitian and a chef, so I host these virtual cooking classes to help provide nutrition education along with some culinary tips. Because if we know how to cook our way to health, then that is the best preventative medicine that we could have. So today's topic is about managing family meals. If you've tuned into other classes, we've done heart health, managing blood sugar levels. So you can always go back and watch those recorded versions of those previous classes. And I'm always open for new ideas or new topics. So if you've never been to a class before, we usually do a little bit of nutrition education first, and then we move on to the cooking demo. So again, if you haven't prepped anything and your ingredients aren't out yet, you can do that as you're listening along. If you need any substitutions for any ingredients, just type it in the chat, or we have a small group today so you can freely unmute yourself and just ask away during our class as well. So just make sure your screen is on speaker view so you can see the big picture of the front-facing view and the overhead view of our cooking display here as well. All right, so we have someone tuning in, my mom from New Jersey, and I see a lot of familiar names in our participant list. So again, she's going to be helping me manage the chat. So any questions that you have, you can easily just drop into the chat, or again, unmute yourself. So get prepped, get ready, and we are going to go through some of our slides first for that nutrition education. All right, so back to Virtual Teaching Kitchen. I created this as a fun way to provide online cooking classes that are free to provide nutrition education, making them really accessible for all, because not everyone has access to go to fancy cooking studios. And also you're learning how to adapt in your own environment with the recipes that we're gonna cook along to. So I'm almost like in your kitchen and you're almost like in my kitchen, but we can work on these things together. I'm trying to do these every month, so definitely look out for the schedule. So today's class, again, the topic that we're going to cover is managing family meals. And our recipe today is a one-pan chicken sausage and gnocchi sauté, which you can change a lot based off your preferences, which we'll discuss during the cooking demo portion. All right, so did you know that September is Family Meals Month? And hundreds of peer-reviewed studies document the physical, nutritional, and mental health benefits of sharing family meals. There's also a considerable amount of research supporting the positive impact of family meals and the interpersonal relationships within families. So studies show that family meals improve family functioning. And what they mean and define family functioning as family connectedness, communication, expressiveness, and problem solving. So research shows that when families gather around the table to share a meal, everyone eats healthier. In fact, dietary patterns for both children and parents are markedly improved simply by just enjoying meals together. So fruit and vegetable consumption has shown to increase during family meals. So whether you're enjoying family meals once a week, 5 days a week, briefly, for extended periods, count on family meals to improve the nutritional health for all participants being involved. If you're the one preparing the meals, enjoying the meals, the family meals do really matter. And we know that every family is different. You might be cooking for 1, 2, a big family of 5. Maybe you're usually having friends and family over all the time, so you're cooking for even more. People battle with different schedules, definitely with school starting, having to bounce around to different after-school activities. And of course, the big challenge that a lot of families face is people have different preferences. And that's okay, and we can adapt recipes and provide options for those as well. So the main thing here is discussing this nutrition gatekeeper. So the nutrition gatekeeper is the person in the household who is primarily responsible for buying and preparing food, and therefore has a significant influence on their family's diet. So it could be you, it could be somebody else shopping, or maybe it's a tag team where someone's shopping, someone's preparing, and you have to work together on that. So this nutritional gatekeeper can have a large impact on their family's diet and health and can set an example for their family in several ways, including how you talk about food. So food talk. We're not putting labels on food. No foods are good or bad or not healthy or healthy. We kind of want to just keep everything pretty neutral and talk more about colors and flavors and energy that these foods are providing. We also want to think about food choices. So the nutrition gatekeeper is the one who brings home the food, they're preparing the food, and they're managing the food for all different meals. So breakfast in the morning as you're running out the door, packing lunches, dinner on the go, dinner at sitting down, depending on what your schedule is. And then also mealtime behavior, how a family behaves at mealtime. Are we eliminating screens? Are we watching TV? Are we having discussions? Do we have a routine of discussions? Like, how was your day? Let's talk about one good thing that happened today, one maybe not so good thing to happen today, and then we can discuss as a family. So research shows that family meals and eating together lead to that more healthful food choices among children and adults of all ages. So this extends beyond eating. Getting kids involved in the cooking, setting the table, general table manners, like don't yuck my yum, can all be part of the family table. This also includes parent food bias. So this one's really interesting. We've all grown up learning and understanding what foods we like, but we still want to introduce a variety of foods to a family and who we're sharing our meals with. So I had one client who hated mushrooms and never introduced mushrooms to her family because she didn't really like them. So her children has never tried a mushroom until they came to a cooking class, which I found that was very interesting because mushrooms are not that unique of an ingredient, but it was a food bias that the mom didn't like it. So we're trying to avoid those food bias. So we also don't want to yuck someone's yum. Just because someone else doesn't like it doesn't mean we have to say ew or gross. Or predetermining, especially for children, oh, my kid won't eat this, or my child doesn't like that. Let them explore, let them try things out for themselves. So let's make a plan. So the real opportunity is to create these eating habits that can be easily repeated. I'm not thinking that everyone needs to cook from scratch. I use a ton of shortcuts all the time at home. I'm not baking my own bread, I buy bread. But everyone is going to have a different family dynamic and their different preferences of how they're going to plan their meals. So make it easy. Find out what works best for you. If it's sticking to prepared meals that you're adding your own twist to, or semi-prepared items that you're kind of putting together as a dish, that might be a way to get a meal on the table versus getting takeout. Leaving washed fruit on the counter or cut up veggies in the fridge ready and accessible to go. It's so easy to open a pantry and see a bag of chips because it's ready and accessible, but maybe carrot sticks are not chopped and ready, or the apple's not washed, or clementines can be peeled. To make it just easier for yourself, to make it easy grab and go so it's a simple decision and less effort. So you want to have a plan. Typically, I like to kind of map out the week, what days, who's going to be home when. Are we gathering at the table? Are we eating on the go? So even if you're eating on the go, you can still have a quote unquote family meal if you're having that togetherness as you're eating a meal. So having that plan is you want to build meals around different ingredients. So in these classes, you'll notice that there's a lot of produce because we want to make produce the star of our dish, our plants the star of the dish. We want to increase our fruit and vegetable consumption. And we want to elevate those flavors so they're not boring. And then build it around other foods. So I know many of you know me. We come from an Italian family. We eat pasta. But how do you make pasta into a balanced meal? You may have salad on the side. You might have some meatballs with it. You could add some veggies into your sauce, depending on how you want to balance that meal out a little bit more. And then just keep repeating. Find what works for you and continue on that process. So some weeks are going to be better than others, and that's totally okay. So start small. I like to really look at this as how can I get the process started? It's a little intimidating after you have a busy day at work and you come home and you have to think about what we're having for dinner. Maybe you don't have a plan, but you have stuff that can get ready to be made. So for instance, a rotisserie chicken. Those are great to just pick up and you can turn it into just eating the chicken as your protein. You can shred it, make it into quesadillas. You can top it on salads for the week. Really, the possibilities are endless. So if you have any other ideas for that, drop them in the chat of how you would use your rotisserie chicken. And then I like to save the bones because then you can always make a broth or a stock afterwards. Those little salad kits, those are really easy. So having salad at dinner was part of our dinners growing up. It was just always available. And you're not necessarily always going to have time to chop up everything and have that ready to go. So those salad kits do come in handy. You can make your own dressings if you want to sub out the dressings, whatever you want. Frozen veggies, canned veggies, all are going to be great options. Steamable bags of rice, whole grains, anything to get that grain on the table, and then our canned foods. So if you went to the other class, we talked about utilizing pantry staples, but if you rinse any of your canned goods, like your vegetables or beans, simply by rinsing it, you can reduce the amount of sodium by 40%. So looking for a low sodium option or no salt added option is going to be best, but if you don't have that available, still rinse it, no matter what. And then I have a picture of tacos over here because I like to add meals that's kind of like a choose your own adventure. Choosing your own adventure meaning all the ingredients can be out and everyone can make their version of the taco that they like. This can be in the form of different kinds of bowls or salads or whatever you want to choose your adventure to be. Batch cooking is really great. I like to do this with whole grains, is batch cooking a whole grain for the week. So quinoa, brown rice, barley, and I cook it pretty plain because it's turning into other things. So it might be going into a soup. It could be added to a salad. It could be part of a side dish. But again, you have that base prepared and you can turn it into other things. And check your schedule. How do you navigate everyone's schedule? Really manage your expectations. I'm not saying everyone needs to eat meals as a family 7 days a week and it needs to be always fully prepared at home. You could get takeout, that's totally fine. So really manage your expectations of how many days a week you want to try to get a family meal together. And then if you see, I have a little picture here. Say you have soccer practice or you have meetings or something. Set up a little picnic or eat in the car together is still providing that connectiveness and the togetherness that you're creating that bond and all the benefits of sharing meals together. So I would love to hear from you about your strategies of what you like to do to help manage your family meals. Are you doing any of those things already? How do you like to utilize a rotisserie chicken? Because that's one of the really easy ones to just take home. And then you can have one meal here. You can add it to, again, your salad the next day. But I would love to hear some of your ideas as well. And as you guys are getting ready, I'm going to get all of our prep ready as well. So we are going to start our one pan chicken sausage and gnocchi sauté. So have your ingredients out. If you did not cook your gnocchi yet, please cook your gnocchi. If you didn't rinse your beans, rinse your beans. I actually am using, I don't know if you can see the package here. I found yesterday at our ShopRite, I don't know what grocery stores you guys shop in, but a potato gnocchi with basil. So I'm going to try that today because as I was perusing the aisles for some gnocchi, I thought that would taste delicious in this. But any gnocchi really works. And you can sub out at Trader Joe's. They have that cauliflower gnocchi. If you really want to pump up the veg here, you can add that cauliflower gnocchi. So first things first is we are going to cook our chicken sausage. I have the chicken sausage, the brand is Alfresco, and I chose the roasted garlic, so we're going to add more garlic flavor to our dish. These we're going to slice, so we can start with that. But if you wanted to use regular sausage or different kind of chicken sausage, that is totally fine. This is more of a slice kind of sausage versus a crumble. But if you had a different chicken sausage, you can easily do a crumble version for this as well. So instead of slices, you would just break it up in your pan like a crumble. So I'm going to slice these on a bias. So as you see, by doing that, you're creating more surface area. A bias just means on an angle, on a diagonal. So when you're doing this, you're going to have more surface area touching the pan. So you're going to get that caramelization flavor going on more with your chicken sausage. If you prefer smaller pieces, just break it down a little bit smaller. And as you see, watch my knife just kind of slide right through. We're not going like this. We're just letting our knife really do the work here. All right, so as I'm going to cut my other two, I'm just gonna get my pan preheated just to let that go before we get started cooking. We always wanna start with a nice hot pan. All right, chicken sausage. What kind of chicken sausage are you guys using today? Anyone else using the alfresco one? It's honestly one of my favorites. They have so many really good flavors. All right, our chicken sausage is ready. So a fun little ingredient that I was shared with recently is this olive oil, but it's infused with an onion flavor. So I thought it'd be fun to use today. So they sent it to me to try out and experiment with, so I'm very excited. There's also one with garlic. You could easily add onions to your pan as well if you want to. Again, this recipe is very flexible. The idea of having a one-pan meal is less dishes, easy to prepare, and this is cool because it has a little spout that pops up when you open your bottle. So you always want to start with the hot pan. Then you're going to add in your oil, and then you have to wait till your oil gets hot. Because what's happening is cooking is all about the transfer of heat. The heat is heating the pan's heating the oil is going to heat the food. And if we don't do that properly, then what's happening is we're not going to have an even cooking process. And when we don't have an even cooking process, some foods are going to be burnt, some foods are not going to be cooked well enough. So we want to make sure that we are cooking foods evenly. So you can always just kind of feel your hand over it, or you can kind of tell if it's starting to give that little smokiness there as well. So I don't know if you can hear through the screen, but you just heard that sizzle. That's what we're looking for. So the sizzle is telling you that you waited properly, and that's your applause for waiting the proper time. So I'm not going to fuss around with these too much because I do want some good browning on each side of these. So I'm just going to kind of set them in my pan as I'm prepping my other ingredients. So next up we have our mushrooms. So a couple different ways you can chop your mushrooms. So you can either pop off the stem, but I want to utilize the stem. I'm not going to let that go to waste. And slice it to make it easier so you have a flat surface for your cap. These are pretty big, so that might be a good method. And then you just want to slice through your mushroom here. And if you have any like little woody ends of your mushroom, you want to trim them off. Or alternatively, you can flip them upside down like that, so the stem is facing up, and then chop through for a nice slice. It's really based off of your preference. So any questions or comments so far? If you're cooking along with me, are we at the same pace? Are we at the same part right here? Because I don't want to go too fast and then you're left behind. I don't hear anything, so maybe that's a good sign or maybe that's not so good sign. We shall see. Alright, I'm just going to take a peek here at my chicken sausage. Starting to brown. Just going to give them a nice stir here. I'm using a cast iron. You don't have to use a cast iron, but I find that it really gets a nice sear on the food that you're cooking. So we're going to continue to chop our mushrooms. So I love mushrooms. I think they are very versatile in a dish. And if you're trying, oops, what happened to my camera? Yep.
How do you know that the pan is ready before putting the sausage in to hear that it's ready?
So, sorry, I'm trying to fix my camera here that keeps shifting for a second. So to know when your pan is ready, you can just put your hand over it, kind of feel that the warmth there. Or also, if your olive oil is starting to really shimmer, that's a good way. If you see a little bit of smoke coming up, that's a sign as well. What you don't want to do is put water in your pan. I know that sometimes people say to just add a splash of water if it kind of spits back at you. That's kind of dangerous. Or you can even just add one piece of whatever you're cooking and to see if it will start to sizzle right there. Alright, so let me check on these guys. Now again, mine are roasted garlic, so they are already smelling really great garlic flavor here. We're just continuing to prep. So mushrooms are one of the only foods that will have a natural source of vitamin D. It's because the way they are grown now, they use ultraviolet light to grow your mushrooms. So again, vitamin D is a nutrient or vitamin that most people lack because we're more protective of our skin in the sun right now. So we're wearing sunscreen, we're staying in the shade, which is great because that will help prevent skin cancer. But we're potentially now not providing that vitamin D absorption that we potentially need. So the way we can get it is through food. Most food is fortified with vitamin D, meaning that they're adding it into our food. So again, mushrooms are one of those natural ways to add in that vitamin D. So our chicken sausage is almost done. I like it pretty brown, so I'm going to let it go for a little bit longer. You can do your desired doneness. If you are using like a regular sausage, you might need to strain any excess fat. Since this is chicken sausage is much leaner, so we don't really have to worry about any excess fat here. Alright, so I'm using my tongs now. I switched over. I thought it'd be easier to flip each one individually just to make sure they're getting browned evenly on each side. So what I was thinking as I was prepping for this, we went apple picking recently, and adding some apples to this dish could be delicious. I haven't tried it yet, but I might experiment it with my leftovers. Alright, that's going. We have our mushrooms. And make sure you have a bowl handy ready to go because we're actually going to remove our chicken sausage from the pan to cook the remaining of our dish, and then we're going to add it back in. Alright, so I'm going to remove this. Let that hang out for a minute. We're going to add a little bit of oil back to our pan, depending on how much oil is left in your pan. So I need a little bit. My pan's a little dry. We don't want to overdo it on the oil for our mushrooms because a lot of moisture is going to come out from our mushrooms. A lot of times we add it in and it kind of soaks up right away. We get nervous that there's not enough oil in the pan. But let the cooking process do its job, and the moisture from those mushrooms will come out. So mushrooms going into the pan. So don't rush this process here. Let the mushrooms really do their thing. Alright, so we'll leave that alone as we move on to our garlic. my favorite ingredient. So if you're using any pre-chopped garlic, totally fine, no judgment. But if you are using it, just use extra because some of that flavor is going to be diluted as it sits as it's been chopped. So I know the recipe calls for 4. I have 5 here. I like to add a little extra, but all depends on what your favorite preferences is. I have them peeled already, except this one, because I just want to show you. You don't have to go crazy and whack it. You can just apply pressure to make sure that the peel comes right off. So if you have any like kind of woody ends, you just want to trim those off. Because we don't want that. And a good rule of thumb, if you are using that pre-minced, 1 teaspoon is about 1 clove. As you see here, my cloves are pretty big, so I'm probably adding like double the amount that I originally said for this recipe, which is fine. I love garlic. So, when you have your garlic, I'm going to start by just doing a fine slice. And this is where you can practice your knife skills. If you kind of notice, my knife is never leaving the cutting board. I'm just doing a nice rocking motion. And as you keep practicing, the easier it gets to chop faster. So don't be worried if you're learning how to really cook or use your knife properly, because if you go slower, it's totally fine. So now this is what I call the fan method, is where you put the tip of your knife down on your cutting board, and you can either put your palm of your hand to hold it in place or your fingertips to hold it in place. And we're just going to keep chopping until we break it down to the consistency that we want it. So the finer you break down your garlic, the more intense flavor it will be. So if you want something a little more mellow, just do slices. But if you want something a little bit more intense, the finer you mince it, the more intense the flavor will be. All right, I'm gonna give my mushrooms a little stir here. And anytime you think your pan is a little too dry, don't necessarily jump to adding more oil. We don't want to have it too oily, because not only are we adding excess fat to our dish, even though it's a heart-healthy fat, but they're very calorically dense. You can add a splash of broth, you can add a splash of water in there too if you need to. All right, we all at the same point now. So your recipes usually always call for garlic to be added in later in the cooking process. The reason is because we don't want to burn our garlic. Nobody wants burnt garlic because burnt garlic tastes bitter. All right, my mushrooms are looking good. They are looking nice and tender. They're going to continue to cook, so I'm not worried about getting them cooked down even further. Yes?
Why does the garlic have more flavor when finely chopped?
Because you're exposing the cell wall, you're breaking down the cell wall more, and those finer pieces, you'll have more of them, number one. And number two, you have more surface area covering the inside of that garlic, so that more of that's being infused in what you're cooking. So I have a hefty amount of garlic. We need a follow-up question to that. Yes?
Not about garlic.
Okay.
Since the gnocchi is made in advance, how do you keep it from sticking together?
So mine is definitely sticking together right now as we speak, and that's totally okay. It will break up a little bit, but I added a touch of oil to it after I took it out of the pan. All right, so our minced garlic is in here. So funny thing is, as I was shopping for ingredients, I was just doing it quickly, just like so many people do. I accidentally grabbed some chickpeas, and the recipe calls for white beans. So really any bean works here, it's totally fine. So we're adding protein coming in from our chicken sausage, but now we're adding plant-based proteins as well. And our plant-based proteins are going to additionally add some fiber. So we're getting more fiber into our diet, and we're any of your plant-based proteins are going to be low in fat or no fat. So we're adding those in to kind of warm them up, heat them through. If you're using white beans, that's fine too. Your chickpeas are going to have a little bit more of like a bite to them, a chew, versus your white beans are a little bit more buttery. So again, I use canned beans. There's nothing wrong with using canned beans, but as that rule of thumb is you just want to make sure you're rinsing your canned beans. Does anyone remember what percentage of sodium? Quiz time.
Question about the beans being rinsed and dried.
So I just put them in my colander, my little strainer here. I rinsed them and then I just shook them enough until they were dry enough. So they're going into a pan, they're cooking down, they're not soaking wet, so that's fine. If you're roasting them and you want chickpea like snacks, like roasted chickpeas, you really need to dry them with some paper towels.
Someone answered 40%.
Ding, 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 40%. Good job.
Thomas.
Good job, Thomas. All right, so next up we have our kale here. So let me just make sure I'm back on. Oh, add white beans and gnocchi. Sorry, got to add our gnocchi next. So as you see, it's probably clumped together a little bit, and that's okay. But as we add more ingredients, it will break apart, and we'll be fine. So now, adding our gnocchi now is going to start infusing all the flavors. And next up, we're going to be adding in our kale. So I just kind of tore it apart a little bit. If you have some really big leaves, you can use spinach if you want to in place of kale. If you have any of these like big stems here, just rip them off. I bought the pre-chopped one, but if you didn't, you could just strip the kale from the stem and give it a nice rough chop. So, other classes I maybe talked about how to massage your kale ahead of time if you're consuming it raw, because it breaks down the cell wall and it makes it more tender. The heat's going to do that for us now, so we don't have to worry about that. So we're adding in lots of kale. And it's okay, it will wilt down. And now we're going to add in a little bit of broth. And our chicken sausage can go back into the pan as well. I'm going to give it a whole toss as well, because we're going to make all those flavors really come together. So it calls for about a 1/4 cup. I'm going to kind of just use my best judgment here. Just enough to really get things going. You should hear it sizzle as you add it to the pan. And I'm going to use my tongs to really toss everything together to get everything moving. So this is where we need to accumulate some steam. And you want to put a lid on top of your pan. This will help wilt that kale a little bit for you. So I don't actually have a lid for this pan, so we're going to use this one. Kind of fits. It's just going to sit right on top. It will generate enough steam. So anytime you need to do this process here, you could leave your lid on for a little while, let it do its thing for a couple minutes, give it a toss, and then it will continue. You can cook it down as much or as little as you want. But at this point, everything is cooked, so you can eat it as is. I use actually an unsalted chicken broth, because we have a lot of salt coming in from that chicken sausage. I didn't even add salt to the pan. Always in my recipes, salt is to taste. You can sprinkle it on at the end. What's the point of salt? If you've taken my classes, what's its purpose? You know this answer. The purpose of salt in cooking. Let's see. Flavor. Okay, good answer. So it's enhance the flavors that we're working with. It's not meant to make your food taste salty. So most sodium consumption is not from cooking our food. It's from processed or packaged foods or eating out at restaurants. That's where most of our sodium intake is coming from, not when we're cooking. So I encourage using salt during the cooking process because you are enhancing the flavors that you're working with. It's not meant to make your food taste salty. All right, I'm going to check on our kale for a sec now. So it's starting to wilt. I'm just going to give it a toss so everything, again, is really going to come together.
Okay, sometimes when I use spinach and it wilts, it then clumps together. How do you have it not clump together?
I would chop it up a little bit. Sometimes the leaves will intertwine and get really stuck there, so give it a rough chop before you add it in. Another issue sometimes with kale is it is very water packed, so you might add some more water to your dish. So if that happens, you just want to take off your lid and let some of that water evaporate. But to prevent it from kind of clumping together, unfortunately, it's going to kind of do that sometimes. So if you're kind of mixing it well together within your dish, it shouldn't be much of a problem if you give it a rough chop first, because then it will kind of cling on to the food that's in your dish. Any other questions, comments, concerns? So this came together really quickly. Obviously, it's helpful when you have a couple things prepped, like your gnocchi in advance to dump in. But as you were cooking, that could have been going on in the background. My package of gnocchi took 2 to 3 minutes to cook. You're just bringing water to a boil, and they just kind of float to the top. So you can, again, swap out a whole wheat gnocchi, that cauliflower gnocchi in here as well. You can add different veg in here. You could add that onion if you want to as part of the process when you're adding in your mushrooms and your garlic. What other variations would you kind of add here? I would love to hear your ideas.
Roasted red peppers.
Ooh, roasted red peppers. That would actually add a really good color to this dish as well. A little pop of color. I love that. So mine is pretty much done here. I have a little bit of liquid accumulating at the bottom, so I'm just going to let it go and let that evaporate as that kale continues to wilt down. But I'm adding an optional ingredient, a little bit of Parmesan cheese on top. That's also going to be adding to that umami flavor, that savory flavor, plus a little bit of salt as well. All right, so you saw all that kale. That does not look like too much kale in the pan now. But this is, again, an easy one-pan meal that comes together. So if you're looking for something quick for a weeknight, this could be the recipe for you. Alrighty. Not always the best at plating it very neatly, but as long as it tastes good, doesn't matter what it looks like, right? I'm adding a little bit of our Parmesan cheese right on top. And there you have it. We have our beautiful chicken sausage and gnocchi sauté. So this came together really quickly, and if you are cooking along with me, I would love to see your creations. If you want to unmute yourself or share your screen right now, feel free. If you want to wait and email me or post it on social media, I would love that. I just would like to see how you did in your creation. So you can follow at chefjulie_RD on Instagram or at Virtual Teaching Kitchen on Instagram. And if you are posting, we have the hashtag MadeWithVTK. So we can follow that and see it trending if we all are cooking all of our meals together. So again, thank you for tuning in. I hope you learned something new and you have a delicious dinner now awaiting you. If you have any other questions, don't hesitate to reach out and be on the lookout for other classes and programs. If you're already not on my email list, I encourage you to join it just to make sure you're up to date with the most recent events coming up. So thanks again, enjoy your meal, and I'll see you guys next time.
Can't
Bye,
wait to
everyone.
eat, Julie. Thank you.
You're welcome. Oop, where's my mouse working? There we go.